Welcome to the Ghostly Gallery Podcast, a place where we explore the world of horror and mystery in film, television, books, and in popular culture. Well, greetings, everybody. Welcome to another show. My name is Bruce Markusen, and once again, I'm joined by co-host and producer Tracy Asteria. Tracy, how you doing?
I'm doing really good, Bruce. I've been kind of previewing some of the really brand new horror movies that are coming out in 2026. And I'm really impressed with what they've got going on so far from what I've been able to tell. Some
Yeah.
really excellent movies on the way this year. Yeah.
Have you seen anything yet?
So I actually did. I watched the film We Bury the Dead. That was the first horror release for 2026. And
Okay.
it wasn't too bad. It was interesting. But that's the first one. But there's so many good ones that I'm looking forward to that are coming out in in the month of January, February, and March. Um, we've got that 28 years later, The Bone Temple is coming out, I
Yeah.
believe next weekend, I think. Um,
Yeah.
and then there's the new one. I don't know if you have seen any previews or any buzz about this one, Bruce. It's called Undertone.
No.
And so far that one, um, people that have seen it before the release date at film festivals, I believe, they say it's excellent. It's like the scariest movie that they've seen. It has a lot of
Really?
possession vibes, I guess, to it.
Hmm.
And so I'm definitely looking forward to that one. And something that's kind of like on topic for our show today, Robert Eggers' new film is coming out on Christmas Day in 2026, and that is called Werewolf.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to that one too, but we've got a whole year to wait for that one.
Right. Right. Well, as I had told you in an email, I went earlier this week to see The Housemaid and really enjoyed that. Went with a friend at the local theater, and I thought that was really good. And by the way, we do have one of the cast members from that film coming up on the show. Now, it's not Sydney Sweeney, and it's not her co-star, but Amanda Seyfried, but we do have someone who was in the film, and I think she'll have some interesting things to say about that and other horror movies that she's been doing. And that's all I'm going to say about that for now. But that's something to look forward to. But The Housemaid is definitely worth seeing. It starts out, first half is really not like a horror movie. It's more of a drama with some romance thrown in, a lot of conflict.
Mhm.
But then the last half hour, 40 minutes really picks up steam. And I went in thinking it might be a lot like The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, but it really is not. It's very different from that. So
Wow.
that's a movie we need to talk about during a future episode, The Housemaid.
Nice.
So that's a little bit of a sneak ahead. But before we get too far astray here, let's talk about this week's episode. And what we're doing this week, we are going to present the latest program in our series called Creature Features Monster Movies. This is a series where we look at the subgenres of horror. We look at films that deal with a specific kind of monster or other supernatural being, everything from vampires to Frankenstein monsters, ghosts, mummies, witches. We did our first program a couple of months back on ghosts. That went, I thought, very well. And tonight, in the second program of this series, we're going to offer a retrospective on some of the best films that involve werewolves. Before we talk about the films, and we've picked 8 from the history of werewolves, and they're not necessarily the best 8, but I think they're all pretty darn good, and they offer a smattering of different eras, different kinds of films, and all of them have a pretty good following in the genre. So we'll get to those 8 films in a moment. Before we do that, though, a little history of werewolves. So they first became part of European and Russian folklore in the 18th century, but they did eventually make their way into American culture through full-length books, short stories, and also stage plays. And as silent era moving pictures became popular in the early 20th century, the werewolf slowly made its way into the film industry. In 1913, the first ever film about werewolves came out, and it was titled simply The Werewolf. Pretty straightforward. A story involving Native Americans as werewolves. It was based on an 1898 short story called The Werewolves, plural, and directed by a Canadian named Henry McCrae. This film had a running time of 18 minutes. Of course, again, this is early days of cinema, silent era, 18 minutes. So that was pretty long for that period of time. We would consider that, I guess, a short film today, but certainly back then it was a pretty big deal. And unfortunately, like many of the films that came out in that time period, the 1910s, that film, The Werewolf, is now considered lost, the result of a fire at Universal Studios in 1924. So it's a film that nobody who's alive today has ever seen. Then in 1925, the first full-length film about werewolves came out. We're still talking silent era here, but this is full-length, titled Wolf Blood, A Tale of the Forest. And it runs for 68 minutes. That was longer than, some of the early monster movies of the 1930s. And this 68-minute film tells the story of a white Canadian man who is injured in an accident, receives a blood transfusion from a wolf. Apparently, no human blood was available. And as a result of this transfusion, he turns into a werewolf, or at least he thinks he has. And this movie, although it's very old, 1925, it can be found on YouTube. You can just put in Wolf Blood, A Tale of the Forest on the search on YouTube, and it will come up, in fact, in multiple places. So those are some of the early ventures into werewolfism, lycanthropy, if you will, both in terms of stories, written stories, and also silent era films. And then that brings us to 1935. And this is where we get more into the mainstream. And the first film we'll talk about is one that I'm sure many fans of vintage horror will remember. And that's called Werewolf of London. So this was the first full-length movie about werewolves in the talking picture era, again, 1935. And it really did help to establish much of the werewolf mythology that is still espoused today, such as the belief that man turns into the beast on nights when there is a full moon. Boris Karloff was originally sought for the lead. So this is a little bit after he becomes a household name in Frankenstein. They were after him to be in the lead, but he doesn't get the part. Instead, the filmmakers turn to a lesser known, but still very capable American actor named Henry Hull. Hull plays both the werewolf and Dr. Wilfred Glendon, a scientist, a botanist who travels to Tibet in search of a rare flower. While Dr. Glendon is on this expedition, he is attacked by an unknown animal, and he eventually begins to turn into a werewolf repeatedly, with each transformation resulting in violence and murder. Hull gives Dr. Glendon a real sense of vulnerability, so we have some sympathy for him, maybe in a little bit of a different way than Lon Chaney would in the later movie, The Wolfman, which we'll be talking about next. Now, the famed makeup man, Jack Pierce, initially planned to cover Hull in heavy layers of facial hair and grease paint. Now, there's a legend that arose that the actor Henry Hull objected to the extreme makeup because it made him look too monstrous. Well, that is not true. That is a myth. Cortlandt Hull, the great nephew of Henry Hull, and I've met him. He's been at Monster Bash in the past. He's made this point to me. He's made this point during lectures that he's done. That legend about, his ancestor objecting, that's just not accurate at all. Here's the real story. The film's producers were apparently the ones who objected to the look that Pierce had given Hull, and they wanted a toned down appearance. Remember, this is 1935. You've got the Hays Code, you've got censorship. So there's concerns about the way that monsters look, how fearsome they appear. So basically, the film's producers were the ones who told Pierce, you've got to cut back on some of the hair and some of the monstrous look. As such, Hull looks significantly less frightening than Lon Chaney would look in 1941. In fact, the first time I saw still photos of Henry Hull as a werewolf, kind of looked like Eddie Munster from the
Oh.
Munsters in the 1960s. I mean, he's a little more fierce than that, but he looked a little more playful, if you will. I don't want to say childlike, but it was reminiscent of the Eddie Munster character played by Butch Patrick on the 2 seasons of the Munsters. And certainly by comparison to what we would see with Lon Chaney and what we would see in, future films like with Benicio del Toro, nothing as fierce or as violent looking as in those movies. But I think still for the era of the mid-30s, the makeup effect, it's sufficient. It does create the lycanthropic monster. And I think, certainly for audiences of that day was probably enough. And if we suspend our belief today, it works fairly well. So you've got Hull playing the dual roles of the werewolf and the good doctor. Another key player in this film is Warner Oland. And Warner Oland is the guy who played Charlie Chan in those old-time movies. He co-stars as the werewolf expert, Dr. Yogami, and he provides a very strong presence in the film. He's really good. The cast also has a couple of other very capable actors. There's Valerie Hobson, who was in The Bride of Frankenstein, and Lester Matthews, who appeared in The Raven. Now, if we look at a movie like Werewolf of London, it's certainly, a predecessor to The Wolfman, which would come out 6 years later. It's not as impactful as that movie. It doesn't have, the flow and the amount of action that we would see with Lon Chaney. But I think it's still a good movie. And it does provide a peek into Hollywood's early treatment of lycanthropy. While I don't like it as much as The Wolfman, I have talked to some people I really respect, and they actually tell me they like Werewolf of London better than The Wolfman. So Werewolf of London does have a following. It has a very gloomy atmosphere that is certainly very effective for this, story of a man who, against his wishes, against his will, if you will, turns into a werewolf when the moon is full. So it's a good, solid movie, and it's certainly one worth watching, especially if you like the werewolf subgenre, and we hope you do if you're listening to this show. I give it 3 stars, 3 stars for Werewolf of London. So that's our first film, and that does bring us to The Wolfman, which came out in 1941. Lon Chaney Jr., one of my favorite, stars as Lawrence Talbot. He returns to his hometown in Wales for the burial of his brother, who's died rather suddenly. And at the same time, Talbot is trying to reconcile with his estranged father, who is played by the great Claude Rains from The Invisible Man. But during his return, Talbot is bitten by a gypsy werewolf played by Bela Lugosi. It's a small role, but a good role for Lugosi. Even when he's on screen just for a few minutes, he has an impact. You always remember him.
That's right.
And because of the bite from this gypsy werewolf played by Lugosi, well, that renders Talbot with this very much unwanted fate. He becomes the reluctant monster, and he really can't control the situation. Again, whenever there's a full moon, that's when he makes the transformation. Now, here are a few notes, Tracy, of interest about the film. And it is a movie that made Chaney into a national celebrity. He'd been doing movies for a while and had done some significant parts, but this was the one that really put him on the map. Now, one of the strengths of The Wolfman is its array of makeup and special effects. So once again, we have the famed makeup man for Universal, Jack Pierce. He does the application, uses grease paint, puts on a snout made of rubber. I'm sure that was real comfortable for Chaney to wear. Also, layers of yak hair, this actual yak hair that he used to create the appearance of the Wolfman. And it's a lot more, well, fierce, violent looking, intimidating than what we saw with Henry Hull a few years earlier. This application was not easy. It took about 5 to 6 hours. And there's always been this story that Lon Chaney Jr. just did not like Jack Pierce. He felt that he was very rough in the way that he put these treatments on, and not just this movie, but other films too. So I think the bad blood between them, especially Chaney toward Pierce, I think it really started with this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But Pierce was great at what he did, even though his personality could be very grating, could be very abrasive. Now, in addition to all of this makeup, 5-6 hour application, what this film also did was used a dissolved transformation that really wasn't used in Werewolf of London. And this shows the gradual change of Talbot from human to wolf in real time. Took place over the course of probably 15 or so seconds, maybe a little bit longer. And this was stunning for this era. I mean, 1941, it's really ahead of its time, and it still holds up to this day. It looks like something a modern day filmmaker would do. So it shows you the talent that Jack Pierce had. And this use of this dissolve really worked well. Some other interesting things about the Wolfman. The film references a supposedly famous poem which begins with the words, "Even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night can become a wolf." Contrary to popular belief, this did not come from an ancient legend. This poem was actually penned for the movie by Kurt Siodmak, who oversaw the writing of the screenplay. So he's the one who came up with this. This was an original poem that they're quoting from in the film. Similarly, the entire story, the script of The Wolfman, does not come from classic literature. In contrast to movies like Dracula, which of course comes from Bram Stoker, Frankenstein, which comes from the great writer Mary Shelley, and The Invisible Man, which comes from H.G. Wells, this story, this script, this was original concept. It does not come out of literature. And it's a story that, again, was created by Kurt Siodmak. And he was actually influenced by his own struggles as a Jewish man living in Nazi Germany. He was one of the guys who went through that, horrific situation involving Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. Now, in addition to a very good original script and very fine acting, again, you've got Chaney, you've got Claude Rains, some other very accomplished actors. The film is also hallmarked by wonderful atmosphere. There's great scenes, on the foggy moors of Wales. That terrific makeup application from Pierce. Also a fast-moving storyline. And let's not forget the incredible performance by Lon Chaney Jr. And, there were a lot of people who wondered about his casting. They didn't think that he was that great an actor. They wondered how he was going to pull off this role. He's supposed to play a guy coming from a noble British family. He doesn't have a British accent, and he doesn't speak like, somebody that would be from nobility. Even with all that, he's able to pull this off. He plays Talbot with a tremendous amount of sympathy. And he's also got the physical strength and build, to handle the actions of the Wolfman. So he just does a tremendous all-around job. And it's no wonder that Universal would tap him 4 more times to play the Wolfman in subsequent films. He's the only guy who did the Wolfman for Universal Studios in this era of the 1930s and 40s. So he does a great, great job. Also, much like Werewolf of London, the Wolfman helped pass along much of the werewolf lore that we still follow to this day. And because it's a more popular movie than Werewolf of London, a lot of people got their first taste of werewolf lore by watching this movie. You talk about the ability of a full moon to turn a man into a wolf-like creature. A lot of us first got exposed to that whole idea watching this movie. It's a classic. It's one of my favorites among those Universal Studios films that came out in the 30s, 40s, even into the early 50s. I love it. I give it 4 stars for The Wolfman. I know, Tracy, you've seen the film. Let's hear some of your thoughts on The Wolfman.
I absolutely love this one, and I totally agree with everything you said. I also do say 4 stars. I love Lon Chaney Jr. I think he was an excellent actor, and this movie really highlighted his capabilities, I think. And it's one that I do watch. I've seen it multiple times, so I'm a big fan of it. I really do like it. But I'm curious, Bruce, did you see this movie before you saw Werewolf of London, or did you see Werewolf of London first? Do you recall?
I only saw Werewolf of London a few years ago at a Monster Bash convention. I hadn't seen it before then.
Oh,
I saw The
wow.
Wolfman. I probably saw it back in the 70s for the first time when I was really young and I didn't remember
Mhm.
much of it. I've seen it several times since then, but Werewolf of London, while I'd read about it and I'd seen all the still images of Henry Hull and what he looked like as the werewolf, I only saw it probably within the last 4 or 5 years.
Oh,
They did screen it
interesting.
at Monster Bash. Quite a few people were in fact, that room was filled to watch this old movie. So I saw that second. And, maybe if I'd seen Werewolf of London first and then The Wolfman, maybe I'd have even a stronger feel for Werewolf of London. I think it's a good movie. I
Mhm.
just happen to think The Wolfman is a great movie. And there's no shame in Werewolf of London falling short of that standard. So, yeah, Werewolf of London for me is a relatively new experience.
Oh, interesting. That's a movie that I haven't seen, so it is one that I will have to put on the list and take a look at. So that's exciting.
Yeah,
it. I love watching some of these old movies for the first time because it's like a brand new experience. It's like you're living right in the era. So
yeah.
I think that's going to be a good watch.
And to this day, I still don't think Lon Chaney gets his full credit. We've had his descendant, Ron Chaney, on the program, and he, of course, has great admiration, and he knew Lon quite well. For whatever reason, this guy just doesn't get the appreciation. Still waiting for that star on the Walk of Fame in Hollywood. Don't know when that's going to happen. It should happen soon, but it hasn't up until now. He's the only guy to play the 4 major monsters from Universal and really to handle them all well. He played the Mummy, he played the Frankenstein monster, and he's really good in the Son of Dracula movie. He plays Count Alucard, who actually is Dracula. I just don't understand why he doesn't get credit. It was in Of Mice and Men. He's great performance there. Some people say, well, he was a fine character actor, but he was more than that. He was also a leading man, and his versatility just doesn't get credit. I mean,
Mhm.
he had more range than he was given credit for, and it's kind of a shame that even to this day he's not recognized fully. People say, "Oh, he's a good actor." I think he was a lot. I think he was a great actor. He really was.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, Tracy, I've done enough talking for now. The third movie that we're going to discuss is one that you're going to handle, and this jumps ahead to the early 1960s. Tell us about this one.
So, this one that we're going to talk about is Curse of the Werewolf from 1961. It's a gothic horror film and it's from Hammer Studios. It stars Oliver Reed in his first starring role, and it's loosely based on the novel Werewolf of Paris, who is written by Guy and Dory. And I might have said that wrong. I'm not sure. But the film was directed by Terence Fisher, and it's set in 18th century Spain, And the story begins with a beggar who is unjustly imprisoned, and he's subject to brutal mistreatment. And years later, a servant girl who's played by Yvonne Romaine, she's assaulted. She later gives birth to a child who's born on Christmas Day, which is supposedly a very bad omen. And it's under kind of tragic circumstances. So the little boy, his name is Leon. He's adopted and he's raised by a very kind hearted man who hopes to give him a normal life. But as Leon grows into adulthood, strange urges and uncontrollable rage, they begin to surface. And he soon learns that he's cursed to transform into a savage werewolf when the moon is full. So, as Leon struggles to suppress this monstrous nature, this film explores the themes of like fate, repression, and consequences. It's anchored by Oliver Reed's powerful and physically powerful performance. And Curse of the Werewolf, it stands out as one of Hammer's most tragic and emotionally charged monster films. It's very gothic atmosphere, but it's also really human. And it was interesting. I found this movie really interesting. It was a little bit longer than I thought it would be. Um, and Oliver Reed's, he didn't appear until about midway through this film as the adult version of Leon. Um, but I thought it was really good. And it was the first time that I actually saw this one. So I saw it a couple of days ago. And I will be super honest. I don't, and this sounds terrible, but I don't typically gravitate towards Hammer horror movies as much as I do the Universal
Mhm.
movies. It's just a, I guess it's a bias, just a weird preference, but I do prefer Universal. So Hammer's just a little bit different for me, but I thought the story was really good. It kind of took several different turns, and I thought it was great to see Leon's perspective of turning into this werewolf. And one thing I found really interesting was like part of the lore that was talked about in this movie was that his urges to turn into a werewolf would be suppressed with the love of a woman.
Mm.
And so I thought the ending would be a little bit different because he did find kind of like the love of his life, but the ending kind of took me by surprise.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Oliver Reed, Yvonne Romaine, and Catherine Feller as the love interest, I thought they were all fantastic, and there was really great character development in this movie too. Um, my only little nitpicking thing was I would have liked to have seen more about the lore of the werewolf, so just a little bit more, and to see just more of the werewolf, I guess. But, other than that, like,
Mhm.
I thought it was okay. Um, the makeup was really good. I thought he was a little bit
Yeah.
terrifying at times,
Mhm.
but, I thought he was really, really well done, and I thought it was very well worth a 3 out of 5 stars. Like, that's what I gave it. Um, yeah. So what about you, Bruce?
Well, I guess in general, I probably like Hammer films a little more than you do.
Mhm.
Although in general, I'm a huge fan of Universal, no question.
Right.
Some things that I think are a little different here. First of all, this is the first werewolf film presented in full color. And to see that makeup in full color, to see the blood actually red
Yes.
as opposed to black, I think that probably made a huge impact on audiences in the early 60s when they first saw this. As you said, the makeup is excellent. Roy Ashton was the guy who did makeup on most of these Hammer horror films. He was really good. He was basically the equivalent of Jack Pierce, and maybe not quite as talented, but still very, very good. And often didn't have big budgets. Hammer usually did these things pretty inexpensively, but Ashton was consistently able to produce good makeup, and he certainly does that here. I think it's interesting to see a young Oliver Reed,
Yes.
who we would see, later on in movies like, Burnt Offerings, and of course in a lot of other types of films. He was a very talented actor. Unfortunately, he was an alcoholic. He got into a lot of fights. He was he was a bit of a troublemaker, especially when he went out on the town too late, into the wee hours of the morning. He was a guy that also could be very difficult. He was someone that you would call in that era a male chauvinist. We've seen
Oh,
him on
wow,
some of the
yeah.
late night talk shows, on the Tonight Show. He could be very difficult and condescending toward actresses. But here we see him when he's much younger
Mhm.
and hasn't, maybe built up this reputation for, being a troublemaker. Maybe his ego is not quite out of control at this point, but I thought, he does a very nice job, even though we only see him starting about halfway through the movie. So,
Mhm.
he's very good. And to have a guy like Oliver Reed with his talent in a horror movie, that brings a lot of credibility to the film. I think this is a really good effort from Hammer. I would give it a little bit more. I'm going to go 3.5 stars on this one. I think it's really an excellent movie, and it has received such good acclaim that it makes you wonder why Hammer didn't do any other werewolf movies.
Oh,
They
really?
they did many Dracula films, they did
Mhm.
Frankenstein films, they did, several mummy films, but for whatever reason, they only did this one werewolf film. Now, maybe I'm trying to remember, maybe it didn't do well at the box office,
Mhm.
but it did get some critical praise, and it did have something of a following in the 60s. So I'm a little surprised that over the next 15 years, while Hammer was making these kind of movies, that they never did another werewolf movie. So that's a little bit weird, but this is a good one. I wouldn't put it the same level as The Wolf Man, but I think it's definitely worthy of discussion, which is why I included it in the 8 to begin with.
Oh, yeah, and absolutely. Like, I did look at this one online just to kind of also kind of see what other people were talking about, and this movie is really well loved. Like, a
Oh yeah,
lot of horror fans absolutely love this movie, and, one thing too that really stood out, I didn't really realize this was kind of like the first full color werewolf film, but, actually 2 things that stood out. You could like, Oliver Reed's piercing blue eyes
mm,
in this like, it was just unreal, and
yeah,
the little boy that played the version of Leon, it a very spitting image of Oliver Reed, like, it was like, "Wow, it looks like they
yeah,
just made him grow right up." It was really odd to see, and the other
yeah,
thing, you had talked about seeing the blood in real color. um, I thought that was really interesting because it wasn't that vibrant or that deep red that you would suspect to see from, like, a werewolf attack like the blood. It was,
yeah,
like, this very odd color, like, reddish, orangish, weird color, which was really odd.
yeah.
So, those were the 2, like, really odd things that kinda stood out for me, but, yeah, it was interesting. It's definitely something that I would go back and watch again just to have another peek at it since I saw it from start to finish, just go back and see what I might have missed the first time.
Interesting you bring up about the blood. I know that in the 60s, even into the early 70s, filmmakers they typically used a different kind of a substance or mixture for
Mhm.
blood, and it doesn't look as real as what's been used in later years. And I
Right.
forget exactly what it was, whether it's some kind of a syrup, but they did Hollywood and British filmmakers too. They did change that at some point. And now what you see in modern contemporary horror films, it looks a lot more realistic. It really does. But back in the
Yeah,
60s, yeah, it didn't look, aside from it being a red color, it just didn't look quite like what we expect blood to
exactly.
look like. Yeah. All right, so that was Curse of the Werewolf from 1961. We're now going to jump ahead 20 years to the next film, and this one is a real favorite for me. This is a classic, The Howling. The Howling stars the great Dee Wallace as Los Angeles newswoman Karen White. She is being stalked by a serial killer, and she seeks refuge, physical refuge, but also some peace of mind by going to this mysterious California mountain resort known as the Colony. Now, she thinks the Colony is going to be a safe place. There's no way the serial killer will be able to get at her there. But as it turns out, the Colony is not a safe place. It is actually hiding a secret. You can imagine what that secret is. And it's going to put Karen and some of her friends from the TV station into grave danger. Now, Rick Baker was the first special effects guru to work on this movie, but he left early in the production and he went to work on a rival production, An American Werewolf in London, which was basically being filmed at the same time, and both would be 1981 releases. So Baker's assistant, Rob Botton, took over, and Baker was great at what he did, but Botton, tremendous as well, and he delivers a series of makeup effects critically acclaimed, including multiple transformations of man into werewolf. And these scenes were quite frightening. I watched this again the other night. It still holds up, but especially in that era, it was pretty scary stuff. One of the best features, I think, Tracy, of this movie is the standout supporting cast. So we mentioned Dee Wallace, but look at the other people that appear in this film. Christopher Stone, who would eventually marry Dee Wallace, but sadly would die very young, I believe, from cancer in the mid-90s. You have the British actor Patrick Macnee, John Carradine, longtime actor. Slim Pickens is even in the movie. They all play important roles. And then to add to the fun, you've got some cameos. Two famed directors, Roger Corman and John Sayles, have very small roles. They don't play themselves. They play other kinds of characters. They're only on screen for probably less than a minute. And another famous guy who appears is Forrest Ackerman, who was the longtime editor of Famous Monsters of Filmland. So Ackerman, Corman, and Sayles all have brief appearances in this movie. Another interesting thing, many of the characters in the movie are given the names of past horror film directors, including George Wagner, and he's the guy who did The Wolfman in 1941. Also, you have Fred Francis, who was one of the great directors for Hammer films, and then Lou Landers, who did The Raven, the original Raven in 1930s, and then did Return of the Vampire in the 1940s. So as you look at the IMDb page, you see all these characters, and it's going to jump out at you. Yeah, these are the names of horror directors. In addition to a great cast, the film is beautifully shot, some great scenery, both daytime and nighttime, in the hills of Mendocino County in California. So it really does make for a visually striking movie. And it's an advantage that I think it has over a lot of other werewolf movies. It's really beautifully done. And this was Joe Dante, who was the director of this. Now, The Howling proved to be such a success, both critically and at the box office, that it has spawned a number of sequels. I believe there have been 7 total. To be honest, most of these follow-ups have been pretty lousy. The second one is pretty decent. And then after that, the quality falls off badly. But it does tell you the impact that they would even think about doing 7 sequels, even if most of them aren't very good. The original film stands out, by far the best, an absolute classic, even 45 years after its release. I think this is one of the best werewolf movies ever made. And in fact, after watching it a few nights ago, I hadn't seen it in a while, I would actually put this at the top of my list. I used to say The Wolfman with Lon Chaney, but I think maybe I'm going to have to put that second. I really like The Howling. And I know you
Wow.
haven't seen this one yet, but you have to see it. It is available on streaming.
Mhm.
It's just a wonderful, wonderful movie. It really is.
Wow, I
Yeah.
never thought I'd hear you say that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think maybe it sometimes gets overshadowed by the movie that you're going to talk about in a
Mhm.
moment, An American Werewolf in London. And you can certainly argue that maybe that's the best werewolf movie ever. And it is great. And I love that one too. But just there's something about the way this film is shot, the high standard of the cast, the acting is great, the story is interesting, and it also has a very memorable ending, which when I first saw it, I was very surprised by, very shocking. Don't want to give it away because it's a big part of the film, but if people have seen it, they know what I'm talking about. It's one of those movies that really doesn't have a lot of weaknesses. I just think it's fantastic.
Nice. Oh, I'm gonna put that on my list for sure. It's something that's kind of always been on my radar, but for whatever reason, I just have not clicked play.
Yeah.
And you mentioned this was directed by Joe Dante?
Yep. Yeah,
Wow.
that's right.
Yeah. So, like, again, like, he's excellent, so
Oh, yeah.
perfect.
So you're going to talk about one now that not only are you a big fan of, but it's a big part of your personal history. So tell us about this.
Oh, it scares me to even talk about this one. But this one is An American Werewolf in London from 1981, and it stars David Naughton and Griffin Dunn as David Kessler and Jack Goodman, two American college students who are on vacation and backpacking through rural England. After stopping at a tavern called the Slaughtered Lamb, where their presence annoys some of the locals, they decide to leave the establishment earlier than planned. But they're warned by one of the people at the tavern to make sure they stick close to the road. And of course, they ignore that advice and they wander into the English moors where they're attacked by a horrible creature. The attack is so violent that Jack is killed, while a critically wounded David is taken to the hospital. He then falls in love with a beautiful nurse named Alex Price, and he also begins to undergo some unwanted changes to his body. So Naughton is very good in this lead role, and he has excellent chemistry with Jenny Agutter, who plays the nurse. And interesting, and I did not know this, but prior to this film, he was actually known for his Dr. Pepper commercials, which I had no idea. And he dances and sings the song "I'm a Pepper." And here he shows his true acting ability, and he delivers a very fine performance. And unfortunately, he lost his Dr. Pepper gig because the company was upset about him being shown in the nude in this film during his transformation phase. So
Yeah.
that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Now,
Oh
up
my
in
goodness
Canada,
gracious.
did you get the Dr. Pepper commercials? Did you get to see those?
Oh yeah, yeah,
You did.
absolutely. That
Yeah.
those are really big when I was a kid.
You don't remember
But
him singing and dancing, and he was like very prominent?
so I remember the commercial, but I don't remember him. I think Bruce legit, I was just like so scarred by this movie. I totally just I black right out when we talk
Yeah.
about it. But oh my gosh. And Griffin Dunn, he
Yeah.
provides great comic relief as this undead Jack who keeps visiting David. And yeah. So this film was the first to win an Academy Award for Best Makeup. And this award was just created in 1981, which was perfect timing for this film. And the man to werewolf transformation, it still holds up today. The special effects were overseen by the legendary artist Rick Baker. So that transformation, that never goes away for me.
Yeah.
Because as a side note, and I've talked about this before, that transformation was so impactful for me when I was a kid because I saw this when I
Mhm.
think I was like maybe I don't know 8 years old or something like that, and I was so afraid. and so paranoid. I truly thought that I would look at my hands and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm turning into a werewolf. My hands are starting to get bigger." Like, I was so scared. I made myself physically ill. I was so scared.
Wow.
So, yeah, that transformation, it is something I will never forget. It was kind of like the first horror movie I ever really saw. Um, and this one will always stick with me.
Yeah.
My gosh, Bruce. Yeah, it was super scary for me, and again, I do rate it 4 stars because it is so scary. Now, I'm not as impacted watching it today as I was way back then, but it still gives me the heebie-jeebies
Hmm.
watching this movie. It's the weirdest feeling for me
Yeah.
to go back and watch this. But yeah, definitely impactful for me. It took me so many years to watch it again. I saw it once when I was a kid, and then I think I only watched it again for the second and third time within the last 5 years. That's how
Yeah.
long it took me to see this again.
So how old were you when you first watched it?
So this came out in '81, and I was born in '73. And when it came out in on VHS VHS. That's when I would have watched it. So I would have been about 8 years old, 9 years
Wow.
old. Yeah,
Probably too soon to see this. In
yeah.
retrospect, you should have waited a few more years.
I don't even know if I would show my kids today, and they're like older kids.
Yeah. Well, you know what's amazing, Tracy? That transformation that you mentioned is 45 years ago. I still think it is the best werewolf transformation that's been done on screen.
hmm
I know that Dog Soldiers has a great one. We're going to talk about that a bit later on. There have been some modern day films, really good werewolf effects, really good transformation scenes. I think this one, if you rate it on a scale of 1 to 100, it's 100. It's just
Yeah,
about perfect. It shows the absolute agony that David Naughton's character is going through. It's so painful to watch, but also so realistic looking,
yeah.
so graphic. And it's amazing that they were able to do this in the early 1980s. I mean, it's so ahead of its time. And to think 45 years later, and been a lot of werewolf movies in that time, I don't think anything's matched it as far as transformation. It's that good.
Oh, exactly. I've honestly, like, I have never seen anything like that since this movie,
Yeah.
and I've seen a lot of horror movies, and I've seen werewolf movies, and I have never seen anything so detailed and so bone chilling, I guess is the right term, like, just visceral, scary, just you could feel it.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's always gonna stick in my brain forever and always.
Right. Now, Tracy, as frightening as this is also a comedy. It has a lot of comic aspects, especially when, I guess you say, Jack's ghost appears to David. And every time he's deteriorating more and more, he looks more monstrous. He looks like he's eroding more and more, but he has a lot of funny lines. So there's a comedy that's mixed in with this really intense horror. Do you think the comedy works?
Oh, yeah, it
Yeah.
does, it does, and just seeing, like, Jack kind of degrade every time he appears, it's just kind of like, you never know what you're gonna expect, and then he's just a pile of bones, but,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely, the comedy does work for this, and usually horror and comedy, like, I'm not a huge fan of, like, the combination, but it does work here just because it's very,
Yeah.
it's not really too heavy on it. I think it's a really good mix.
You mentioned you saw this on VHS, and I assume
Yes.
you saw it on a relatively small television screen.
Yes.
I
Yes.
saw this in the theater.
Holy cow, wow.
So I got the big screen effect, and that made it even more powerful to watch.
Oh, Bruce.
I've seen it since then, and of course, TV screens are much bigger today than they were in the early '80s. But man, to see this on a big screen in a dark theater, wow, you really get the full effect of it.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh. Well, maybe
yeah.
someday they'll bring this back to the theater. I know they're bringing some of the older ones back to the theater, showing them as like special matinees that you never know they might bring this one back to. And
Yeah,
if
maybe a
so,
50th
I might go.
anniversary, you know?
Oh, that's right. That's
Yeah,
right. You never know.
it'll be coming up.
That's right.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is a great one. And from a technical aspect, it's every bit as good as The Howling. It's not, I don't favor it quite as much on a personal level, but it is outstanding.
Yeah.
4 stars, no question about it.
Awesome.
Really good. And also the backdrop for the film is good too. It's filmed in London, even though it's an American director, John Landis. And from what I've researched, he wanted to showcase London the way it looked at that time. You know, we'd come to here in America, we'd come to, see London in a certain way in horror
Mhm.
films in the 30s and 40s. We kind of got the old world London. And he wanted to show what London was like contemporary, early 80s. And we really get that. And then one thing they kind of lucked out on is they got a lot of cloudy and rainy weather during the filming. And that really fit in with the theme. And that's not something you can plan on. It just happened to be that way. They filmed in February and March,
Mhm.
which is, still winter. Now, their winters are not as harsh as what we deal with here in Canada and in northeastern United States. But you do get a lot of cloudy and rainy days. You get some fog, and certainly all of that happened. And that only added to the film.
Wow. Oh,
All
wow.
right, Tracy, you've got another film to talk about from the 1980s, and this is another one of my favorites. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, so this one is from 1985, and we're going to chat about Silver Bullet. So it is based on Stephen King's story called Cycle of the Werewolf. And that kind of received little publicity at the time of the release, partly because of some negative reviews from film critics. Um, but it has become a very respected movie in the genre. So, Silver Bullet tells a story of a werewolf that has invaded the small town of Tarker's Mills, Maine. And we have Corey Haim and Megan Follows, who play siblings Marty and Jane Coslaw, who have a volatile relationship, even though they're both sympathetic and good hearted characters. So Corey Haim, he is the child star of the 80s, excellent, very, very memorable. And this was a really great role for him. And Megan Follows, I want to say, I believe she might be Canadian because I think she played Anne of Green Gables in that series from when I was a kid. So very, very fine actors. And they are living with their Uncle Red, who's played by Gary Busey. And Gary Busey is a very fine actor in this movie. He is full of heart and he is so funny. And this is kind of like the prime of his acting days. But anyway, Uncle Red, he is a man with boundless energy and enthusiasm. And he takes care of the two and does his best to help Marty, who is wheelchair bound. Uncle Red, he creates this wheelchair for Marty, and they call it the Silver Bullet. And in one touching scene, Uncle Red gives Marty this souped up wheelchair and allows him to travel the country roads. And it is super fast and it is super loud and it is super cool looking for any kid who would ever want anything like that. But Busey, Hames, and Follows, they're all really good with their portrayals. There's also some pretty cool supporting cast, and I rewatched this the other day, and Terry O'Quinn is in this, and of course he's an excellent actor. He's been in so many good films and TV series. So again, it was interesting to see him so young as well in this movie. He plays a police officer, and then you also have Everett McGill, who delivers a really fine performance as the preacher with a bad temper and a very hard edge. And I thought this movie was really good. Again, I've seen it a couple of times, and most recently, actually, I just saw it the other day again, just to review it again. And I just it was kind of heartbreaking to go back and see Corey Haim as the little boy in this movie,
Hmm.
just because he's been gone from us in this world for many years now, and you just realize that he was such a talented young performer, and
Yeah.
it's kind of heartbreaking that he's not with us today, but very, very good. And Gary Busey, I've always really liked him. He's just so quirky and just so bold and brash and just like out there. Um, yeah, this was his typical performance, and he was so awesome as Uncle Red. And it was so great to just kind of like re-witness him in his prime days of acting. Um, Again, like, I thought this was a great movie. It's a classic, and, it's great for adults and for kids. And when I rewatched it the other day, I kind of forgot there was, like, some pretty tardy language in it for
Yeah.
younger viewers.
Right.
But but that's okay. I think kids today are used to hearing stuff like that on TV. But, I was kind of like kinda did a double take as I was watching. I was like, "I don't really remember that." But,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a little bit of language in there. But, I thought it was a great little movie, very 1980s, and I actually had to Google it because I was kinda curious if the house that the children were living in, if it was the same house that the movie Gremlins was filmed in, just because of the little, I guess, like, the stair climber for the character to go up the steps. I
Oh,
thought it
yeah.
was just like Polly's character from Gremlins who got kinda, like, went up and then shot right out of the window. I was like, "Is that the same house?" But definitely not the same house.
Hmm.
Uh, but kinda cool. But I thought it was a great movie, and I did say it was 3.5 stars. I think it still holds up today, absolutely. Um, yeah, definitely holds up, and I think a lot of people who haven't seen it should give it a watch.
Well, you have said nothing I disagree with. I love this one too, but I came to the party late on this one. I did not see
Mm.
this until about 5 or 6 years ago for whatever
Mhm.
reason. I know it didn't do real well in the theater. It didn't get a lot of great reviews at the time. There were a lot of other really interesting horror films that came out. Didn't I think Fright Night might have come out in '85 as well,
Yes, it did. I
and
think they were
yeah.
almost back to back. Yeah.
Yeah, the mid '80s were a really strong time for horror films. Silver Bullet got lost in the shuffle, and just for whatever reason, I didn't know much about it, didn't see it, and then some friends of mine said, "Oh, you gotta watch it. It's really good," and I was not disappointed. You talked about Corey Haim, and sadly, he's gone. He died young. Gary Busey, was in that terrible motorcycle accident, I believe, a few years ago.
That's
He's had
right.
a lot of medical problems. I'm not even sure that he is able to act anymore, and it's kinda sad because maybe younger people who didn't see him in his prime in
Mhm.
late '70s, throughout the '80s, he was one of the villains in Lethal Weapon.
That's right.
He did a really good movie that I don't even remember the title, but I know Annette O'Toole was in. It was sort of a romantic comedy, and he played a very good character in that. People may not realize what a great actor this guy was in his prime and some of the diverse performances. Now, as evil as he is in Lethal Weapon, the first Lethal Weapon, that's how good he is here. He brings the heart to
Yeah.
this movie, the way that he supports these kids. He's their uncle. He's basically adopted them. And, this is one of the few werewolf movies that I would say it's a movie with a heart. And a lot of it is because, well, partly because of Corey Haim, but also because of Gary Busey's character. And he's great. He is just phenomenal in this movie. And it just shows you the range that he had, to be able to play evil villains on one end of the spectrum and then just good-hearted people on the other side and make them both believable. Just fantastic. And then you contrast his character to, Terry O'Quinn, who's this, disciplinary police chief. And Everett McGill is one of these, old school preachers who doesn't seem to have much tolerance for anybody who doesn't believe what he believes. Got a very hard edge to him. So there's an interesting contrast that goes on there. But I'd heard how good it was from my friends, and I wasn't disappointed. I go 3.5 stars. It's a spirited film. It's got kind of an uplifting message to it, and it's just really enjoyable to watch. And it reminds you of how good horror in the mid 80s could be.
Oh my gosh, yes, and it kinda leaves me a little homesick for the '80s too, just
Yeah.
because it was, I was a kid, it was a great time, everything felt great, so I'm just a big fan of '80s horror movies
Yeah.
all through. This just fits right in there. I mean, Fright Night, Gremlins, all of
Yeah.
those ones. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Tracy, we've got 2 werewolf films to go. One that I'll do and one that you'll talk about. The first up is from the year 2000, and that is Ginger Snaps. I have to confess on this one. When it first came out 26 years ago, I remember hearing about it. I think I saw it on cable. And when I heard the title, I was thinking, why did they make a movie about a cookie? Ginger Snap. I'm like, what? You know, I knew it wasn't really about a cookie, but I'm thinking, Ginger Snap, how is that a horror movie? What is this about? Well, I figured it out. It's not about those kind of ginger snaps. It is actually a werewolf movie. One of the characters is named Ginger, and the snaps part of it you can read into it because, well, I guess our character does sort of snap at some point. The 2 actresses, Catherine Isabel and Emily Perkins, they play these 2 teenage sisters. Isabel is Ginger, and Emily Perkins is Bridget. Their last name Fitzgerald. They're sympathetic, but they're strange characters. They're in high school. They're obsessed with death. So obsessed that they actually stage realistic looking suicide scenes for a high school video project. And boy, their teacher did not appreciate that, even though the students watching it loved their project. Now, despite their inherent strangeness, these 2 sisters, particularly Bridget, they do grow more likable as the film progresses. Perkins, as I said, plays the younger sister Bridget, comes to her sister Ginger's aid when she is bitten by a creature, actually on the same day that she experiences her first period. Bridget tries desperately to cure Ginger of her new condition, which results in her developing visible fangs, growing a tail, which becomes increasingly hard to hide, and also having lots of body hair. And this is all caused by a werewolf of unknown origins that has invaded their small town of Bailey Downs. And when I rewatched this the other night and I heard Bailey Downs, I said, that rings a bell. And I realized that's the same name of the town in a movie we talked about during Christmas time, A Christmas Horror Story. You remember that?
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Not just a coincidence, because some of the directors and producers of this film, the same people that made A Christmas Horror Story.
That's right.
So they reprised the name for this movie. Now, this small suburban town where Ginger and Bridget live has actually always reminded me of my own hometown, Bronxville, New York. Somewhat idyllic and attractive setting, at least on the surface, that provides an interesting contrast to the violence and bloodshed that is taking place. But in the case of the movie, the seemingly idyllic, attractive setting is really hiding a town that has lots of problems. You've got drug dealers, you've got lots of bullying taking place in school. So, this is not necessarily a great small town. It's got problems, like a lot of small towns have.
Mhm.
So that's an interesting part of the film for me. Then you have the special effects. They're extremely well done. apparently involve no CGI at all, which is kind of hard to believe when you watch it, but they are top of the line and really produce one of the better and more frightening werewolves in horror history. And rather than see that, transformation in a few seconds, it's a much more gradual thing. It's seemingly over a span of several days, maybe a couple of weeks, where Ginger, starts to look more and more unusual, taking on some werewolf traits. But it's not till days later that she fully does become the werewolf. So they do that differently than what we saw in The Wolfman and American Werewolf in London. It's a several days type project, if you will. The film is also interesting because it has this deeper message. And I think it's one that would particularly resonate with young girls in their teens and the difficulties they face, both with their bodies, the changes they're going through, but also, pressures and experiences of the outside world. And I think that's one of the messages that the director and the screenwriter had here, was to show kind of these, parallel problems, girls going through changes, but also changes from human to werewolf. Now, the one note of caution I'll give on this movie, for those who have not seen it, it has a lot of very harsh and very uncomfortable language. So if you're an adult, you have kids, maybe you don't want to watch it with them. Maybe you do, but I don't think I would necessarily be that comfortable, especially if I had a very small child. So the language could be a concern for some. It's a film that's got a lot going on, and it kind of hits you in the face. It's very different from a lot of the werewolf movies we've been discussing, but I think it's one of the better ones of the modern era. And I was surprised by how much I liked it when I first saw it. I still like it, some 25 years later. I give Ginger Snaps 3.5 stars.
Nice. That's one that I definitely have to go look at. I have not seen that one yet.
And it was so successful that it did produce a couple of sequels, not quite at the same level. The first one is the best, as is usually the case, but it's really a good modern day horror film in the werewolf genre. So well worth seeing. So Tracy, that leaves us with one more film to go. What is it?
So this one is from 2002, and the movie is called Dog Soldiers. And it's a British action horror film directed by Neil Marshall. And the story drops us into the Scottish Highlands, where a small squad of British soldiers head out on what they believe is a routine training exercise. Almost immediately, things start to feel off. They find torn up remains of another patrol that was in the area. And before they can fully react, they're attacked by something fast and vicious and definitely not human. So the group retreats. They meet up with this lady named Megan. She's a zoologist played by Emma Cleesby. And she takes them to a farmhouse that is going to be kind of their safe haven, or at least so they think. And Megan seems to know a little bit more about the area than she lets on. As the night starts to fall and the moon rises, the area proves to be a little more dangerous than anyone expected. And they realize the attackers are actually werewolves. So Captain Ryan, who is played by Liam Cunningham, he's a very mysterious presence whose actions tend to add some tension, and he keeps both the soldiers and the audience on edge while they're trying to survive. And some of the standout roles, you've got Kevin McKidd, who plays Private Cooper. He's kind of like the emotional center of the squad. This film was really, really early on in his career. And like a lot of viewers would recognize him from Rome, or specifically Grey's Anatomy, where he plays a doctor on that show. And it just highlights his ability to balance humor, fear, and he's like really super tough in this movie too. Then you have Sean Pertwee. He plays Sergeant Henry Wells. He's very tough. He's a seasoned squad leader, who balances authority with sarcasm and dry humor. And his presence helps to hold the group together during a lot of these um, big moments. And he's got a lot of chemistry with McKidd and the rest of the soldiers as well. He's not as well known at the time as he is today again. Um, he has great performances on TV shows like Elementary and Gotham. So a lot of viewers would probably recognize him more from that once they see this movie. But after they kind of have like some of those moments at the farmhouse, this movie just goes full tilt. Werewolves start to surround this farmhouse. They're smashing through walls and windows, and they slowly wear down these soldiers. They kill them, injuries pile up, they run out of ammunition. There's so much tension in this movie. It's very, very sharp. And there's some quirky British humor or Scottish humor in this movie too. Um, so it's kind of interesting. You have to kind of listen closely, but you do catch the humor. You- because it is like a British Scottish film,
Yeah.
the accents can be a little bit heavy. So pay attention. It's there's funny moments and just the performances of some of these characters. They're really, really great. Um, and so just getting back to the movie, like by the time the morning starts to come up and you see the final survivors fight their way out, there's so much action. It's like a war movie, but it's like a werewolf
Yeah.
movie. You got so many different things coming together. There's like some dark comedy, there's practical creature effects. It's fast, it's bloody, it's kind of fun in a weird way. Um, it's interesting. It's not your typical werewolf movie. Um, it took me some time to kind of get with the groove to this one, but the werewolves themselves are striking. Like
Yeah.
they're stunning, and you don't see like in American Werewolf in London, like you don't see that full transformation really. Um, there's some twists and some turns with who turns into a werewolf. Definitely, it was an interesting movie, and again, like this is one I would feel I have to go back to watch it again a little bit later because
Yeah.
I'm sure there's lots of stuff that I missed during this first run.
Yeah.
But I thought it was pretty cool. I did give it 3 stars, at least for right now. But I do recommend people watch it, especially if they're into like, you know, action horror military type movies.
Hmm.
You'll get a real good kick out of this one. It's really well done. Really
Yeah.
well done.
I learned a few years ago, I wrote an article for an online publication that went out of business. That's a
Mhm.
whole other story. And it was about my favorite, werewolf films from this
Mhm.
genre. Not necessarily the best, but my favorite. And I think I listed 6 or 8. And I left Dog Soldiers out, and people got mad. And they were
Wow.
like, "How could you leave this out?" And I said, "Well, I only had like 8 films. If it was my top 10, I probably would have included Dog Soldiers.
Mhm.
It's outstanding. It just wasn't one of my top 8 favorite, but it would have made my top 10 or certainly my top 12 or top 15. But I learned quickly this film has an incredibly strong following from its fan base. I mean, the fans of this movie really like it. They're as rabid about it as the werewolves that are in this movie, and they are fearsome. They are frightening. And it's all done with practical effects. Apparently, again, no CGI was used here. They used animatronics, full-length bodysuits, and it's very effective. It's an outstanding movie. It's got these great effects, as you say, a lot of action. You're constantly on the edge of your seat, wondering what's going to happen next. The only thing I don't like about it is I think the emphasis on the military is maybe a little bit too heavy for my liking. I can't really think of any other werewolf films that have a connection to the military. Maybe there have been. I don't think any on this list that we've done today. And I thought maybe the military angle was played up a little bit too heavy, but obviously it was a military unit. They're supposed to be on routine training. And then it suddenly it turns out to be very unroutine, if you will. Other than that, it's an outstanding film. It really is. And I understand why the fans like it. Sean Pertwee, who I got to know from watching him on Gotham, he played Alfred, played a very tough version of Alfred, was really good on that. And, his father was one of the guys who played, what's the British show with the wizard? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Is it Lord of the Rings? No. Lord of the Rings?
Yeah. No. It's a TV show.
TV show.
Yeah. It's been on since like the 60s.
Oh,
I can't remember it. Doctor Who.
Yes.
Doctor Who, yeah. His father, John Pertwee, I believe was his name. He was one of the Doctor Who's. There have been many over the years. So Pertwee comes from a really good acting family, and he's a fine actor in and of himself. And he's really good at playing these hard-edged characters like someone, a no-nonsense guy on a military unit. So he does a really fine job here. And it is, another outstanding film from the subgenre of werewolves, no question.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, it was an interesting watch because the first time I saw it was actually just for this broadcast. So, good recommendation.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely worth seeing. So again, the 8 films that we talked about, Dog Soldiers, Ginger Snaps, Silver Bullets, An American Werewolf in London, The Howling, Curse of the Werewolf, The Wolfman, and Werewolf of London. And there have been many other films. We could have included, the new version of The Wolfman with Benicio del Toro.
Right.
In the past, we've talked about The Beast Must Die, which I like a lot, but I wouldn't put quite at the level of these 8 movies. There are many others that we could have picked as well. We usually limit it to 8 because that fits into our format. And I think these are all top of the line. And I think an important thing to remember, Tracy, is that while werewolf films, have never been as popular, they've never had the following of vampire movies or Dracula movies, they're pretty strong. And when you start doing the research, you realize there's a lot of these movies out there in this subgenre, and a lot of them are pretty darn good. And they require a lot in terms of special effects, whether it's practical effects or CGI. And, they're stories that in some cases get pretty complicated, get pretty involved, as you mentioned with Dog Soldiers, and as I talked about with Ginger Snaps. So I think the werewolf is kind of an underrated subgenre in horror, really.
Oh, absolutely. I think it is too, because you don't really, like a lot of people, they do, like you mentioned, they talk about like the Dracula movies. But again, we have a brand new werewolf movie coming out on Christmas Day by Robert Eggers, who did do Nosferatu, which was a 2024 film. So I am really curious to see what he's going to do with a werewolf movie. I'm really curious to see his kind of take on it and what the story is going to be about. So I think that will really kind of, help popularize maybe werewolf films, because we did have one earlier in 2025, and I think it was just called Wolfman, I believe. And the name escapes me as to who did that movie, but again, just I think you're going to see a really strong uptick in werewolf films, depending on how well Robert Eggers' film does.
Yeah, if he's able to deliver a film that's anywhere close to what he gave us with Nosferatu, That's going to elevate this subgenre even more. So that's going to be really interesting to watch.
Yeah.
All right. Great stuff. Thank you, Tracy. We certainly appreciate your contributions, your thoughts on some of these really interesting films from the werewolf subgenre. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you. It's always fun.
Our thanks to Tracy. Of course, thanks to all of our listeners and watchers as well. By the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, we hope that you'll like the program and subscribe and share it with others as well. We certainly appreciate the effort to do that. We do thank you for joining us in this Museum of the Macabre, and we hope we'll see you again next time right here in the Ghostly Gallery.